If you enjoy the subject matter of these podcasts, then you would definitely enjoy any of the 3 Patreon discussion groups that are available. You can read about these groups by going to theinfinitesparkofbeing.com and clicking the participate button. We also offer a free meditation group every other Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. To learn exact dates, check any of the Infinite Spark of Being socials. There should be a link tree with the information in the profile. This is a community of everyday people who are interested in living with a deeper understanding of spiritual practice and how it can be applied in a practical sense to our everyday lives. So join us. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh. And in this episode, we are going to do a thought experiment. It's an idea that I've been playing around with for 100 years. I'm sure I've mentioned it at some point on here, or maybe not. But it's a thought experiment around the concept of God. And I'm going to have to lay out a few things first. So, humans like things to be anthropomorphized. We like things personified. We like to identify with things. And this makes sense. That's why God or anything like that is always portrayed as some sort of a human. When you look in the Hindu pantheon, everything has human qualities. Nothing is not human. Even Krishna's incarnations or Vishnu's incarnations as a fish or a turtle or whatever, even a pig, there's always some human element. Narasimha, again, there's a human element there. There's something anthropomorphical, if that's a word, something bipedal hominid-esque. So I believe that is, in my understanding, that is why within Hinduism especially, this sort of thing is used to give the humans something, because we're living inside of these bipedal hominid meat suits, and we have a mind, and the mind has an evolutionary feature called the ego, and the ego works the way it works. So here we are. This is what is such a struggle, or not a struggle, but a challenge along the spiritual path, is that you have these very limited senses and a lot of biological imperative stuff. So to dip our toes, into Vishnu a little bit. Vishnu within the mythology of Hinduism is the aspect of God that sustains life and is portrayed a certain way. But let's forget about the portrayal and let's just talk about the concept of God, where there's an aspect, a characteristic of this thing that sustains life. Obviously, there's some element that is sustaining things. If it was just a purple cloud in space, I don't think we would approach it the same way. So there had to be some sort of personification of things. In called the mythology of Hinduism, Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita that during times of, where there's some issues, some lawlessness, some spiritual craziness, some sort of decline in moral this or that, God, Vishnu, manifests itself into three-dimensional reality to kind of address the problem. Now, when we talk about, whether something is going right or wrong, it's very subjective. So let's let go of that a bit. That's how we end up in trouble when we start thinking that eclipses are satanic. But there's something very smart within Buddhism, where things are taught differently because we know that, everybody learns differently. So you got to say it one way to this person, say it another way to this different person. ultimately it all leads to the same thing. And I believe that religion and spirituality and philosophy are all doing the same thing, right? They're taking us up the mountain. Now, you look at something like Stoicism, the Greek Stoics, which, according to my metrics, everything that I've read, when I run it through my filters and my measurements, is true. That being said, it does leave out any sort of methodology for attaining this sort of state of mind where these things are, instead of being, we read Marcus Aurelius, or anybody, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is a very popular one, that he makes these statements that he was actually talking to himself, what we find out later. And they're very true, but there is no method for achieving this state of mind where this becomes an integrated way you think, unless you do it over and over and over and over and over again. But there's essentially no spiritual practice or any sort of practice that leads you there. That's always been my gripe with Eckhart Tolle and all these people. But we have Stoicism, which appeals to a lot of people. Nowadays, it appeals to a bunch of people. And a good thing that it does, I think it serves a purpose, Buddhism appeals to certain people. Though I would say Buddhism is difficult for people because it requires, it's less flowery platitudes and memes and more like, hey, you gotta kind of do this thing that's super boring and you're probably not gonna like it. You might think it's difficult, but you're gonna have to do it. Which goes back to what I was saying before in a past episode about people like Ram Dass. The reason they appeal to people broadly is because you don't have to do anything. He just says really nice shit, unless you're the kind of person that goes to dig deeper down that path. If you're not that person, then you just go, yeah, I am a soul and I am special. Then you just go right back to treating yourself like shit and being a fucking burden. But so we have Stoicism, which appeals to people. We have Buddhism, which appeals to people. Christianity, within Christianity, Catholicism really truly appeals to people. People that Catholicism appeal to might not like the whole Protestant thing. It's a little like dry, Quakers appeal to people because they like stillness, they like quietness. Catholics probably like rituals and things like, so it's all appealing. And then Hinduism has its own appeal. For whatever reason, the day I put my hand in a bead bag and I chanted Hare Krishna, that was it. That was it. I have no idea why, but it stuck, and here we are 28 years later, still mumbling the same thing, right? Well, the thought experiment of this is, what if that is God? All of them. It's all source pushing through, getting onto the radar, getting into our heads in any way that it can. Thich Nhat Hanh once was talking about the next incarnation of the Buddha. We've been 5, so this would be like the 6th one. And he said, it might not be a person. It might be a bunch of people. It might be a movement. It might be a philosophy. It might be a whatever. And that always really appealed to me. That these things are ideas, that it is creativity. Brahma, the creative aspect of God, is being sustained by Vishnu. And then all of that has to push through, and I always picture this little barrier. It's going to push through this barrier and pop up into three-dimensional reality, however it has to do it. Or maybe it's just what is happening. It's just there all the time, and certain minds are wired certain ways that they find a way to express this thing in a way that makes sense to, or has broad appeal. Maybe Siddhartha was that thing at the time, and then Muhammad was that thing at the time, and then Jesus, if he was a person, was that thing at the time, or those collection of people. However, we're going to talk about the spread of Christianity. If you believe that you would benefit from working with me one-on-one on grief and loss, anxiety, or ruminating thinking, then shoot me an email or direct message. Or if you're interested in learning about meditation and how it can transform your reality and change your life, then again, please reach out through email or direct message. Thank you. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Plato, Socrates, Kierkegaard, I don't name it, right? That's how that thing pushes through. That's the divine mind. That's superconscious mind. That's when you tap into it and you get that surge, and it feels right, and it feels like it's flow. It's the alpha flow state of the universe. It is just the appropriateness of everything, and you're locked into it, and now we're moving. And you hear certain messages. This message that I'm always pushing, or Buddhism, or whatever it is, and it vibes with you. It jives with your thinking, and it feels right for you on a cellular level. I've taken part in things that didn't feel right on a cellular level, but intellectually I thought it would be the right thing. It wasn't. But, it's experience. That's part of everything I bring to the table here, is all of my experiences. But I think that it's an interesting thought experiment, that it is all God pushing through somehow. That being said, in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna exposes his universal form to when Krishna exposes his universal form to Arjuna, I'm kind of spacing out, daydreaming here while I'm talking, and he sees just chaos and order. He sees pain and pleasure. He sees war and he sees peace. He sees all of it at one time. He sees all of it. That all of it is all of it. That it's all this, that there's difficulty in it. Let's say there's pain and pleasure, or we'll say strife and contentment. So on one hand, strife, personal and external, it's there too. And those ideas push through, and they find, strife or discontentment, they find the conduit, the meat body that they vibe with. And so strife and discontentment come through, and these individuals sow strife and they sow discontentment externally to all of us, or internally to themselves. Maybe it's you just sow constant fucking problems and worry, and that thing comes through as well. And there's also order and love and compassion, and that's an aspect there. And sometimes our minds, as the conduit for this thing, are ripe to express those things. So then the work becomes refining your mind, your nervous system, in a way that allows order, compassion, contentment, love to come through and manifest. And if we don't refine it, if we just let it all put this motherfucker on autopilot, and we just do what we want and think what we want, and right, then strife and discontentment and suffering come through. I was talking to a group of people the other day, and they were addicts. As a lot of people that talk to me are. And I find that population to be deep thinkers and deep feelers. There's a depth to them. People that struggle with addiction in general, whether you like a self-proclaimed addict or alcoholic and you go to the meetings, you've been to rehab. No, but those people that struggle with addiction, I struggle with a certain amount of that stuff. But I said to him, I go, you get to have this burden. You get this pain. You get to experience it, and that's grace. And then there was a family nearby of just fucking muggles, I guess the kids call them now. It's regular people. Basic motherfuckers. I go, these people right here, they're just checking the box. They're just trying to stay at cruising altitude without having to really address anything. When it hurts, they find a Band-Aid. They're not pushing anything. They're not trying. They're just doing what the culture tells them to do. And that doesn't sound like freedom to me, and it doesn't sound like grace. But you guys, you've been graced with so much pain that you need to find a way to deal with it. And that's awesome, because once they get through, or you, if you're once you get through that, and you go, okay, this doesn't work, the next thing is so awesome and appropriate, and it might just be a way of living, it might be a hobby. I told these guys that, I go, it's beyond your wildest dreams, because right now your dreams are like, yeah, I get a Toyota Tundra and 4 jet skis. No. It's going to be so simple and so stupid. It's so simple, it's beyond your wildest dream. You couldn't dream of it. You couldn't dream of being so contented and happy with something so small and insignificant. But this is all this, it's God pushing its way into reality. That it's not that Marcus Aurelius or Siddhartha Gautama or Krishna or Jesus is God per se, but that if these people are real people, flesh and bone people, that they were just the ultimate conduit gateway that allowed Source or God, creation, whatever, to express itself so fully into reality that they were the perfect conduit for the thing. It's when people talk about the muse, right? It comes, and like anybody that's created anything, they're like, when you were doing it, it's like, I don't know where this came from. Or you kind of do, but you hit that flow state where it just fell out of you. Dylan talked about it. Bob Dylan talked about, he's like, I don't know where these songs came from. But there's something to all of this, and it expresses itself. That being said, there is a compassion and peaceful whatever God at its highest understanding could be. And then there's God at what its most horrible understanding or expression of pain and discontentment and dread. That's God too. That's part of this. It's like, if there was a God, then why did grandmas die? It's because fucking people have to die. But and those of you that have a more or less agnostic or atheistic point of view, you guys know, I think, that it's lazy. But it's funny, because even if you have never been given a model of God as a child, maybe you grew up in a household where it wasn't there, you're still influenced by it. If you live on this plot of dirt, you've been influenced by it. But now let's look at which aspect of it you've been influenced by. And how is it? You feel like a good example of one that I find hilarious is Richard Dawkins. This guy's made more money off God than most pastors in a church, or definitely more than most priests. This guy's made a killing off of God. He's a very well-known atheist. But that's what I'm saying. Like, he's made his bones off of God. You know? His whole name. Because if he wasn't an atheist, nobody would give a shit about him. It's interesting. Interesting way to look at it, that it's always there, and it is maybe something we're so inextricably connected to that us doing anything is essentially God. Anyway, that's a little thought experiment. Just wanted to throw it out there. Next week, we're going to get back into, we're going to be back into the Gita, so the next 3 will be dealing with chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the idea of renunciation, what that is, what it means. So, I love you, I love you, I love you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye. If you enjoy this content and would like to support the ongoing creation of this content, go to the website, theinfinitesparkofbeing.com, and explore the many ways to do that, such as the shop button, which takes you to the bookstore, as well as the apparel store. Also, click the about button, read a little bit about me, see what I have to offer you. And don't forget to check out the Patreon tiers if you'd like to join a spiritual community of everyday people with not so everyday interests. Go ahead and check out the participate button on that website. Also, do not forget, we now have a free meditation group every other Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you want to know more about that, check out any of the Infinite Spark of Being social media pages. There's a link tree there with a button. So see you then.